Right, so a little bit about my background quickly, because we need to start talking probably in relationship to team leaders in relationship to organisations. I worked at Leyland for 50 years. I started as an apprentice when I was 15, and I spent 50 years in a huge organisation. When I moved in at 15, it was the second biggest truck builder in the world, and 14,000 people arrived in the town of Leyland every day to build trucks and buses and military equipment. Nationwide, we were probably around something like 40 to 50,000 people. Today, there's just under 1,000 people left in all that process. So I saw the decline of what I would say British industry over those 50 years. Started apprentice, I became the production manager, and anybody gets the chance to see the assembly hall at Leyland. I was production manager in there, and what it meant was wall to wall was my business. Today it's a $500 million turnover, handling around 400 odd people, and that was the domain I operated in. I mentioned 400 people, but it's always been said I put a shadow across 700 people in the process of operating that plant. So that's the time I really want to go back to in '89, when we got a new MD who changed my thinking completely in the process of what we should have done. And I wish I'd met him at 30 instead of 50 in my process. And John came along and we started to change. I became his continuous improvement manager towards the back end of my career. And also he set up a consultancy business within Leyland, which I became a director. So I went out to a lot of companies from about 1993 onwards, doing two jobs, production manager for quite a long while and going out as a consultant. And that changed to when I finished in 2006, I was 10% in the plant and something like 90% out facing. When I left in 2006, the Institute asked a question, because they'd got a relationship of visiting Leyland, who was going to handle that, and I spoke to Leyland, and Leyland said, yes, we're interested. The Institute said we were interested. Three parties, we all agreed, and I've continued to work a little bit with the Institute on various things, still come back to Leyland, still have dealings with Leyland, and I still do a little bit of consultancy in and around the world. Not a lot, because I'm 71, and there's got to be a time when I've got to pull the bloody plug, or Barbara's going to pull the plug at home, somebody's going to have some action on there. And I still get around and still have a great interest in British industry. And I've been over to Ireland this year for my sins. I keep saying I'm slowing off, but I've been over to Ireland twice now to talk and do various things. So I think it's an interesting story, which I'm going to talk. And I'll try to relate where the team leader fits into this process as well, because it's a personal story about me and an attitude of Leyland and how all that changed round. So let's move on. So when John came along in '89, who's John Oliver, and he's OBE for his efforts he's done in industry and in education, professor now at Lancashire University, and he still has his own consultancy business. But he came as MD and all these other things which he started to talk about. What we needed to do. Now, there's nothing surprising up there to anybody. Everybody says that's the standard thing we all do. And it's today, at '89, it applies today. But what I could never understand at that time, why never we progressed? What was the issue in progressing forward with this? Why did we not take it on naturally and do it? We didn't. And the biggest thing, whatever sticks in my head, after he'd been around the plant for about 2 days, he came in my office and he said, David, he said, are you up for change? And what do you think I said back to the MD when he walked into my office and said, are you up for change? And I think Kim answered the question over here very quickly. I said, yes, I'm up for change. He said, well, good. He said, what would you change? And my reply said, have you got bloody time? He said, I've had all the time in the world. And he sat down at the front of me. He said, start. I said, the first thing you need to change is that HR department. I said, it's as much use to me as a chocolate bloody teapot, so I can get at the bastards who don't come to work. I said, the next thing you do is get our engineers to design something I can build. Our materials for people to get the supplies at the line at the right time. I said, our purchasing people stop buying in bloody price and buying quality and delivery. I said, our planners don't talk to us. And I said, that bugger who assigns a line to keep it all perfectly balanced for all my workforce, all the little intricate jobs, I said, you might as well sack him because he's no use to me. I throw his papers in the bin. And I said, I do the assignment. So I said, get rid of Glover. And I says, quality, I says, tell Tony Sturvey, stop sending me 27 reports a bloody week. I only need one. So he looked. And then he went off to see Phil Glover. He said, Phil, are you up for change? And Phil said, yes. Now, Phil was equal rank to me. He said, what's the first thing you'd change, Phil? He said, I'd get rid of that David Graham. Every manager in Leyland was expecting every other manager to change. I never said once what I was going to do. And ask you all, hand on your hearts, are you up for change? Or do you expect somebody else to change? Because if you're not up for change, don't expect a team leader to change. Because if you don't, they won't. Very easy to keep calling all the departments, and as far as they're concerned, it's nothing to do with us, it's every department what's wrong. And that was the first big message what started to come across. Yes, there were performance and quality improvements. Leyland had spent its money on everything. MRP2 going back in history, total quality management. You name it, we'd spent money. But we never moved to anything like world class. So in 1989, our delivery record was around 85%. Our quality number was around 26. And I'll give you some indications of back that. So the delivery now is 99%. Our quality is running less than 2. And when we talk about a number, to try and give you some indication, a light bulb fails, it's 5. 2 light bulbs fail, it's 10. So that's to give you some indication of the quality levels. Overtime was around something like 12 and 15%. Today it's running at 0.5%. Absence was running at 7%. Today it's running at less than, I think it's about 2.1%. So that gives you some indication. Material turns was around 12 in 1989. Today it's in excess of 84. So there's been a lot of changes and a lot of numbers. We only use half the plant capacity in terms of assembly process. With 2 assembly lines, we're down to 1. And we build more vehicles now. The 2 lines are the capability of 16,000 trucks on 1 shift. Today, 1 line has got the equivalent of 23,000 trucks on 1 shift. So we've used half the assembly process and we're up to 23,000 vehicles on 1 shift. So when you think about all this journey when he started in '89, that's the quick numbers I'm giving you where we've come from to where we've gone. So change resistance at all levels, and remember that. Who do you think I used to blame for change? The assembly worker. All the people below me was the reasons why we couldn't get it. So I never looked at myself. Never looked at the management team. It was always the people below me. Competitive pressure, it's still as hard in the truck industry today as it is in your industries. But where could we look in 1989? We didn't have things like the Manufacturing Institute to come along. We had to go and look around and try to find. And we did cotton on to one I think was one of the best things we ever cottoned on to. We never started to look at similar industries. So our material logistics people, we're bringing around 40,000 live part numbers for the assembly process. In the service end, the parts industry, it's about 100,000 part numbers. We didn't go and look at other truck plants and car plants. What we looked at was people like Asda and Tesco, because they're bringing more parts than we'll ever bring in. So don't go and have a look for technology in your similar industries. Go beyond industries what think, well, they're bringing in more parts than us. What's the difference between a nut and bolt or a can of beans? There's nothing. It still has to be received, dispatched, located, etc. And isn't all supermarkets well 5S? I think they're brilliant. We can all go around and find a bit of fault, but in comparison to our plant, there was no comparison. So we started to look around at various industries. What was going on? Now remember, Leyland had been building trucks on that site for 100 years, and a culture, what said, don't tell us anything. Our workforce was an average age of around 45, and some of them there in excess of 20 odd years plus. So going to a greenfield site, it didn't make a lot of sense to us. We had to find brownfield facilities. We did a survey, and that was our population we were dealing with. 20% of our people was downright rebels who wouldn't conform. 60% of our population was downright mourning sods, miserable sods, 15% were mainstays. Did as they were told, but never ever went any further than the job they were given. If they found a problem, they asked the question, what do I do next? They never solved it. And 5% was the people who would take the next step and move on. That was the population we were dealing with. Me as a manager at that time, I kept my diary because I'd actually done this presentation. And it's interesting to understand because the culture at the top will determine the culture at the bottom. Now, I wasn't at the top, but I was next to God. But try to understand the culture. I made this presentation. Now, this presentation was made trying to get some indication what a production manager did. Now, when I presented it, I'll go through the nice words with you, and then I'll tell you the truth. I was very visible, 40% visible on the floor, solving problems and communicating. Because of the huge part number count were coming in, I always seemed to be involved with logistics, part number count. Quality, 5%, looking at the audits and things what were coming through. Industrial relations, dealing with people's problems and shop stewards. Industrial engineering, making sure everybody's work's nicely balanced. And meetings, reporting my figures and numbers on a weekly or monthly basis. Now, when I picked that slide up, Siobhan, who was the assistant to the manufacturing director at the time, said, David, where are you going? I said, I'm going to present him a time. She says, glad you've told me. You only told me to do the numbers on the slide. Well, I said, I'm going to present him a time. It's obvious, isn't it? She said, it is. She says, can I ask you a quick question? I said, yes. What is it? She says, you're next to God. What about tomorrow, next week, next month? I said, what are you getting at? She says, do you never think forward planning, moving things forward? All you do is that's a day-to-day diary. What about the future, forward planning? I said, you're right, Siobhan, stick 5% in before the bastard counts them. There's 105% there, because that day I hadn't time to share it all and make it nicely balanced. We just put 5% in. Well, let's talk about the truth and the culture of the place. I was visible 40% of my time. And if anybody in this room worked for me, you knew you worked for me. Make no bones about it. You had no doubt at all who was your boss. Problem solving didn't exist. It come through my desk. If it jumped or anybody went anywhere else to solve a problem, I'd crucify the bastard the day after if I found out. Communication, I talked down to everybody. Logistics, dealing with people with parts, Andy Grady, who's equal rank to me, I used to say to Grady, I said, Grady, you're just like a bloody lemon. I'll squeeze you till the bloody pips come out your head. And I said, don't tell me your people cannot get more out of them. I said, my old fellow used to say to me, I said, Dad, I've no toothpaste. He says, just put your thumb under its neck, lad, and squeeze. He says, there's always a bit comes out of it. So all I'm getting across there is relationships between other bosses. 5% on quality, blaming everybody else. The poor customer may have it, the problem, but it wasn't going to be me. I'll blame somebody else. So 5% was always pointing the finger. Industrial relations, well, when I walked into the place, every supervisor said to me at the time, David, they're not coming to work on time. They're having days off. Their attitude, their workmanship, they won't clean up. They won't do this and they won't do that. I said, what are we doing about it? They said, well, what can we do with all this sort of, we're not comfortable. I said, well, you'll be comfortable tomorrow. I said, between us all, 16 of you, I said, we'll discipline 10 people every week. And I said, we'll get it into order. So the first week they came in, we'd got 8 on the board. I said, we've only 8. And we set up what we call the 10 steps of heaven. The 10th step, we dismissed the bastards. But we set up this whole system. And I said, there's only 8 on the board. They said, well, we couldn't find anybody. I said, you're bloody joking. I said, you complain about all this crap in here and you can't find anybody. Monday morning, I'll give you a lift. I went out Monday morning and I found 2 people before 8 o'clock. Fetched them in the office, disciplined them with the stewards, and then I fetched the 2 supervisors and disciplined them with their reps. I said, now we've 4 start this week, you've only another 6 to find. If you only come in with 6 next week, I said, I'll give you 8 start. But out of those 8, 4 of you bastards will be on that report. So make your minds up. And I got to around 460 disciplines a year. When I left Leyland, I hadn't disciplined anybody for 12 months. either verbal, counselling or anything, as far as we could make out. So the change in culture. So industrial engineering, if they couldn't keep up and the work wasn't balanced, let your imagination run riot. But don't ask me what we did with them. Meetings, my bum was on the shore and my head was somewhere else. As long as my figures were right, I didn't give a damn. So all I'm saying is team leaders were operating in a culture of what? Yes, I got the highest award I could get. I was known as the Rockvaler, and in the first Gulf War, I was known as the Saddam Hussein look-alike and act-alike. And when I walked into the factory, they got a photograph of me with a green beret on, tash pulled down, glasses removed, and all over the plant there's these pictures, what's saying, with a big arrow pointing over my head, do we trust this bastard? And Saddam Hussein at the side of me with no arrow pointing on him, but just me. And I set out of that office that morning and walked up the track, and there was over 800 people chanting Saddam. How do you think I felt? So what? You don't respond, do you? But let's start to think about team leaders and your operators and your people. I'd stifled every opinion and every view for 20 years. Who's going to cross the line and come and see you? Who's going to come and put an idea forward? Who's going to come and have a chat with you? Who's going to communicate with you? But yet an organisation said we've got an open door policy, and I used to say I got an open door policy, but never anybody asked me the question, who comes to see you? Nobody used to come to see me. If you got the brave pill and did, you always got a job before you left, and if I didn't like the bastard, I gave him 2 jobs. So the message was keep out. But the door policy, the words, and I keep stressing this to everybody, words are easy, deeds are hard. So, the 3 big steps, you've got to convince yourselves and look at your culture of your organisation. Is it going to support people? I used to go to work every day with 2 things, cash and people in mind. Cash and people. And I learned a lesson. I had to go and serve 700 people, not expect them to serve me. And somebody asked the question, what do managers do to support team leaders? I had to change my total thinking. The middle managers, you're coming into your team leaders. Any influencer and middle managers, this is the area we've got to be. And they had to be supported and changed and convinced. And it wasn't going to be easy. When there's a culture, what's a blame culture in an organisation, or a culture what's always scoring points, or managers which are not prepared to operate as teams and work together. We took a census of the workforce to see what their desires was in an organisation. And that was a big stepping stone for us all to really consider where we were going. They wanted to be people to communicate. So where does a team leader come into that? A, he's got to understand the business. B, is able to communicate on a daily basis. Heartfelt, knowing what they're talking about. Being able to communicate at all sorts of levels. So we moved all this aspect where it was the chief executive to communicate right down in the business. Employee systems. We talk in terms of recruitment systems, recognition systems, training systems in the whole process. The team leader is part of the recruitment process now. At Leyland, we call them key operatives, so if I do change language, please forgive me. But they're part of that recruitment process. In terms of recognition, they started to learn to look for the people to recognise them. Because when I was passing, David, come and see what this team member's done. Look what we've done as a team. So they started to communicate, that's what we expected. Training, for them to take ownership of some of their own commitment in training and development, participate in what we were suggesting to them, and training their own people. Organisational structures. The big thing we wanted from them was them to make decisions, because traditionally they passed the message up with a problem or stop the track. We wanted them to solve the problems. So we took away all our supervisors and bring management closer to them, support them, and technical people to support them. And I heard going round, I think, you talked about technical support in there for your team leaders and your people. But stripping away this reverent power, push it up, because it used to vanish. It used to go up through the organisation and down through the organisation. 3 days. before information came back. A week. Sometimes it bloody vanished. And I'm building a truck every 6 minutes. Do I go to the MD and say, by the way, I parked up 100 trucks today because I've not solved the problem? I bent every rule in the book to get a truck through the door. I even used to go and rob the sales park to get parts back into the factory to put a truck out. And send people like key operators and team leaders to go and do that. Go and take that off the part. Go and take that off a truck. 3 months after the report saying there's parts missing on trucks, I said, bloody hell. Eh? You know what the problem is? That sales park's not secure. I said, we need a secure sales park. And they went and spent £200,000 on fencing it off and video cameras. Eh? But can you see the mentality these people are working in? In terms of customer focus. As long as it wasn't their section of them, they wasn't really bothered because we had a total blame culture at Leyland. They moved from that to looking at the process, looking what's going wrong, looking to deal with it, and better still, knowing up the line there's another customer. And it's great to see the 4 team leaders working together. And I said today, seeing them after on the course, how relaxed you are today in comparison. I can't remember how long ago it was when you was coming through, yeah, and, you know, seeing how relaxed you are today and how tense you were in that course. It's unbelievable. Continuous improvement, getting everybody to start looking for lots of little steps. I mean, our organisation's 1,000 people. If I can get everybody to save me £1 a day and an attitude change, that's 2,000 changes taking place every day. And them team leaders have to be involved in that. Management style, I've said enough. Look at it. Is it a blame culture? Is it one that abdicates its responsibilities? Lets people get on with it and think they're doing all right? Just looking at the numbers, or are they involved with the people? Teamwork and empowerment. If you treat them right and you work with them and you train them right, they'll grasp and take on empowerment. They will start to want to do more and take more responsibility and accountability. But with a dictatorial management, they will do nothing other than what they're expected to do. Communication, it says itself. And it's really essential they are become good communicators. So on courses where you can help them to improve all them, do it. But I'm not going to go through all that. But basically, that's what they're involved with as a team leader, as well as management. Training and development discussions. They have to have a training matrix there for the people to be moving on. Weekly briefs. They have to make sure everybody gets the weekly briefs. It's put in their hands every week. Team briefings take place. Team meetings take place. 6 monthly business review, that's moved now where the MD stands on the soapbox. She does it every month. Andrew does that every month now at Leyland because of the economic climate and the difficulties everybody's going through. We sit down with the trade unions every week without fail. The manufacturing director, the operational director and the HR director. Meet the boss. They have an open forum once a month where a cross-section of people go in to ask the boss questions. The difficulty with that is it takes a while to get it comfortable because people don't always buy into it. But the main thing he's looking at is his network working. Key operatives and team leaders communicating well. Joint improvement, bringing people together to work together. Remember Andy Grady I mentioned, the lemon? And it was interesting to listen when you were moving product. We had to get the stock accuracy at Leyland because our shortages were all around stock accuracy. I contributed to as much problems as he did. But when we worked together, we came out shoulder to shoulder. We understood one another's problems. And today, when I was in Leyland, I think a fortnight ago, I was talking to Andy Grady with the greatest respect, and he's gone up the ladder, gone up further. Fantastic bloke. But a different relationship, working together. Meet the teams. And with quality time at Leyland, I won't go into that, but it's an issue what we did. And quickly, then were all the things what we threw at it. But team leaders were expected to get into that. If you don't give them the tools, they don't know what to do. But give them some indication what the tools are and then support them by your management sides because people go on courses and come back. That's the critical thing. I mean, I'll pick on this one here. They sent me to Cranfield because I was red ring to go after the survey. There was no doubt about it. He was going to get rid of me. And they sent me to Cranfield, and I come back, and I always remember his words. How did you want it at Cranfield, David? I said, I've done it all before. He said, why have you never applied it? And I couldn't answer. And when we finished our conversation, which wasn't the pleasantest conversations as we're going through the door, because we didn't get on with me and this MD, he said, and by the way, we managed a fortnight without you. Because I was a control freak. I said a lot about how you left to get on with your job. Do your job. And if you're away from the job continues. We get quality and delivery by right now in Leyland. We were all operating a level down. We're all operating at the wrong levels. Now we all operate at the right level up. Well, that's just one instance. But every one of those, you would expect a team leader to be involved. Well, if they haven't got the tools to participate or get involved, or the people get involved, it'll go nowhere. But remember, they've got to have that support to do that. And it'll only be successful if management change. Because what your input is today, you'll get the same results tomorrow. And every time you put your same input in, you're going to get the same results. There's no ifs and buts. So, yes, that's what we had to get to. Involvement, ownership and commitment. And I walked in at Leyland at 15 years of age, and I was proud to walk through the gates, and I was proud to walk out of the gates at 15. I went through all the 70s and 80s with British Leyland and you name it. I wouldn't tell anybody where I worked. And when I walked out in 2006, I was proud to walk out and leave a factory what's world class. Shingo now, Shingo Bronze. So, and I think it's probably one of the first in the UK. Yeah. So that's sort of indications of where it's got to. And getting people to work together. And the biggest message I said to you all is the biggest team's got to be the management team. Don't expect anybody else to work in teams if they don't work as teams. They'll just throw it through the window. If they can see people like me wandering around, scoring points, playing the cards, playing the political game, they will not get involved. So the biggest team has always got to be is the management team. And just a quick, that's where we are today. Our last survey was suggesting that sort of thing we've got to play around with. And getting team leaders to start to ignore this moaning aspect of the job. Be patient, it takes time. Have they all got copies of these slides, everybody, or no? No. Right, but what I'm saying is that's what's expected of me. That's what I had to get to. And get away from this whole aspect of when I was red ring to go. Because I always remember him saying, what was your management style, David? Because he'd got the survey at the front of him. And I said, I think I'm a fur bastard. He says, your words are perfect. He says, they've just dropped off the fur and left the bastard. And that was what was said. But that's what I had to get to. And I think what you're looking at today is what we expected from our team leaders. Was the ability to coach and mentor, to be patient, involve and engage. And if we could get that out of them, heartfelt and honest, and the managers heartfelt and honest about what they were doing, it shifted. So our business didn't talk about systems or tools, which we've applied every tool what you talk about, but the big thing we went for in '89 was to change the culture. Because if we didn't change the culture, that place would have been shut. And the UK doesn't need a truck builder building 20,000 vehicles a year. It would have shut, and there would have been something on that site now, either houses, a supermarket, whatever. Because if we shut down tomorrow, Europe will replace those 20,000 vehicles in 4 weeks. So there's only one thing what keeps you alive, is cash, profit, and a culture that wants to work with you. So thank you. I must have run out of time, I'm guessing, a little bit. Thank you very much.